if stories and legends can offer us the key to unravelling the hottest political issues of the day? What would it mean if all the answers to today's burning questions were presented in easy-to-digest narratives and myths? Join us as we examine some of the most fascinating tales, some mythological, some historical, and apply their lessons to understanding the chaos of modern politics. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. Welcome to The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, a LibertyNation.com production. Boris Johnson is the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. It's been a long time coming, and his ambition has never been hidden under a bushel. What we have seen since he accepted the role offered by Queen Elizabeth in a formality ceremony is a man determined to deliver Brexit for the British people, come hell or high water. But what of the man himself? His jovial and high-energy persona appear a welcome breath of fresh air in recent British politics. He's a smart man who has held a great office of state and won election as the Mayor of left-leaning London on more than one occasion. During his first day in power, he swiftly removed almost all serving cabinet members and replaced them with loyalists. A smart move, you might say, and it's certainly one that bodes well for those who wish to see Brexit delivered as quickly as possible. But was this grand washing away of the former ministers an act of wanton destruction, revenge for past slights, or simply a new broom to create a brand new launchpad for his ebullient and positive vision of the future? Today, we're going to look at what lies behind the public face. Is he really the bumbling, affable English stereotype his opponents claim him to be? Or is there a darker, sterner side hiding just below the surface of the man who once said he wanted to be king of the world? Described by the Irish Times as the biggest cabinet's bloodbath in British history, the term Knight of the Long Knives is being thrown around almost with gay abandon to describe the wholesale sacking of cabinet ministers. The Knight of the Long Knives, also known as the Rum Purge or Operation Hummingbird, happened in 1934. Adolf Hitler, on the cusp of real control, needed not only to get rid of Rum, but also to remove the growing power of the Nazis' own SA, the Storm Detachment paramilitary unit. These were threats to Hitler's power, and he needed to get rid of them, not only to shore up a growing power base, but also to enshrine in German law the possibility of extrajudicial killings. Estimates for the number of deaths range between 85 and several hundred, with probably over 1,000 people arrested. But perhaps this Knight of the Long Knives is not the best term to describe what has happened. Let's look instead to The Godfather, rumoured to be one of Boris Johnson's favourite movies, and suggested by some of the new Prime Minister's enemies to be more of a training video. Boris's sister Rachel Johnson once related a story where an old friend had requested help, but the unlucky petitioner had at one time crossed Boris. Rachel was instructed to turn down the favour. She explained his refusal saying, quote, "He's quite Sicilian, you see," end quote. Sebastian Shakespeare, a journalist and long-time friend of Boris Johnson, said, quote, "Whenever I see him at London parties these days, we reminisce in mock reverie about our Oxford University days together. Before he always mutters, under his breath, the words, 'Omerta, Omerta,' end quote," referring of course to the Sicilian Code of Silence. I want to talk about one scene in particular from the Godfather movie, and of course the fantastic Mario Puzo book. Very recently, Boris was asked what his favourite movie scene was. He replied that it was the baptism of fire scene from The Godfather. This is when Michael Corleone orchestrates the grand revenge that nobody saw coming. He takes out the heads of the other mafioso families, Al Green out in Las Vegas, who disrespected his brother Fredo, his sister Connie's husband Carlo Rizzi, who had set up Sonny to be killed, and even one of his own capo di tutti capis, Tessio. These were all people who had wronged him in the past, and assumed that since the old power, Don Vito himself had died, that revenge would be forgone. They forgot the old adage, revenge is a dish best served cold. This saying, incidentally, has its first traceable iteration not in Italian as you might expect, but rather appeared in the 1782 book Les Liaisons Dangereuses, although it's likely much older. In The Godfather, the baptism of fire scene is the summing up and accounting of all past wrongs and transgressions. Those who have gone against the family are punished, even though they may have more recently built bridges or tried to make amends. It's the point in the story where we finally understand who Michael Corleone really is. He's not just the youngest son, forced to meekly accept his fate. He is Don Vito reborn, and perhaps even more dangerous. No one is suggesting that Prime Minister Johnson has this streak of murderousness in his soul, but the idea that he bides his time, waiting for revenge when the circle comes full, seems appropriate. The politicians he has selected for his cabinet are pretty much all loyalists, not just to the Brexit cause, but to Johnson himself. The selection of key personnel, and more importantly the outing of the non-loyal, was more than just a reward and punishment trade-off though. It was a warning, a direct warning for those who are smart enough to see it. I want to turn briefly back to The Godfather. You may be surprised to learn that the original novel was not entirely plucked from thin air, nor from the brilliant mind of author Mario Puzo alone. Puzo based the entire saga on a famous family. Not a modern-day mafioso family, but rather on the Borgia family, the family of Rodrigo Borgia, or Pope Alexander VI as you may know him. Mario Puzo was a huge fan of the Borgia family story, and in fact, shortly before his death in 1999, wrote a book called The Family, which tells the tale of the Borgia family, their rise to power and final defeat. You have the patriarch of the family, Rodrigo Borgia, who is obviously Don Vito Corleone, the three sons, Giovanni, Cesare, and Joffre, who are represented as Sonny, Michael, and Fredo respectively, and the daughter, Lucrezia, who is represented by Connie. The baptism of fire scene has been played out in real life long before it reached the pages of Mario Puzo. King Ferrante I of Naples was a contemporary of Borgia and was, in fact, tutored by him as a youngster. It is perhaps from this dastardly king that Boris Johnson draws his inspiration in dealing with vanquished opponents. You see, now that Johnson is Prime Minister, many may ask, well, what happens to Theresa May? And here's where we learn what real warnings actually are. It used to be fairly common for the new leader to grant the old leader a position, or perhaps a seat in the House of Lords, the upper chamber, where they could still be of service. Theresa May was not only PM for 3 years, she was also the longest serving Home Secretary in more than 60 years. She's a talented woman who understands politics. So why has she not been booted upstairs, as the saying goes? Mrs. May will spend her remainder of days in Parliament neither on the front bench nor in the House of Lords. She will be a backbencher who has little power, no responsibility other than to her constituents, and will get very little opportunity to speak her mind. She will sit on the back bench as a reminder to those that oppose Boris that they too could spend their political careers in purgatory or in their political wilderness if they cross him. Back to King Ferrante of Naples. He had many enemies and was not shy in punishing those or warning those who posed a threat. In his grand castle, he had a room, almost a tableau of the Last Supper, in which his enemies, those who had crossed him, were stuffed as mummies and seated around the table. Whenever he wanted to impose his will on someone, he would offer them a tour of his home, taking them eventually to this morbid scene. His opponents would invariably understand that if they did not fall in line and play ball, they could end up spending eternity as a feature in this macabre diorama. Is it too much to suggest that there might be a parallel here? That Theresa May, stripped of power, is to act as a reminder to those that cross the new boss that they too could end up as a teachable moment in the machinations of power. I'll leave you with a quote from The Godfather that seems quite apt for Boris Johnson, and is something we could all do well to remember when we see our rights trampled and our dignities impugned by those in the halls of power. Quote, "He had long ago learned that society imposes insults that must be borne, comforted by the knowledge that in this world there comes a time when the most humble of men, if he keeps his eyes open, can take his revenge on the most powerful. Thank you for listening to The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, a LibertyNation.com production. Join us next episode, where we'll be talking more history, politics, legends and stories. Until next time, thanks for listening.